Previously on Popping Collars.
We have to make a stand for women who really don't have a fair shake, which keeps them subject to the violence and vulnerability of poverty. Mm-hmm. You know, as long as they're going to be poor, that's going to be part of their story. You know, there's that old adage about give a woman a fish, eats for a day, teach her how to fish, feed her for a lifetime. It's like, good God, women have been fishing a long time. We know how to fish. You know, that's not that big a deal. Fishing is not that hard.
Welcome to Popping Collars, the podcast that lives at the intersection of religion and pop culture. My name is Ricardo Avila. I'm the rector at St. Luke's Episcopal Church in Los Gatos, California. With me is my co-host, Greg Knight. Greg, Where are you and what's going on?
Hey, Ricardo. I am the director of Children and Youth Ministries at the Church of Bethesda by the Sea in Palm Beach, Florida, where it is getting chilly. It got down to 60 degrees, I think, today. Ooh, it's a cold front in southern Florida.
Getting your Santa tan on.
No chance of snow. No chance.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Also with us is our co-host, Betsy Gonzalez. Betsy, what is happening in your world?
Oh, Ricardo, Advent doesn't exist in schools necessarily. We have a wreath and stuff. We're just on that slow march towards not only the birth of Jesus, but exams. So it is literally a season of preparation on all fronts.
Right.
Oh, and where am I doing that? I'm doing that at the Episcopal High School in Alexandria, Virginia, where I serve as head chaplain.
Nice. Thank you, Betsy. It occurs to me that the arrival of Jesus and final exams both have their apocalyptic elements.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. For sure.
Very good. And today we have a special guest, a first-timer to the Popping Collars neighborhood, Shayna Watson. Shayna Watson, tell us who you are.
I am a deacon. I serve as a deacon with the Episcopal Church here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and soon to become a priest in the next 6 months.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. In my former professional life, I'm a board-certified chaplain, and most of my experience is in hospital and hospice chaplaincy. Yeah, I found that in chaplaincy and pastoral care that there's an intersection of justice and advocacy work, and all of those things just kind of meld together in spirituality. So, which is part of the reason what led me to discovering and learning more about theology and how it also intersects with pop culture. So I'm just happy to be here with you all.
Well, and those of you all out there who heard us pressing TheoCon over VBS, that was Shayna's baby.
Yeah.
Great job with it. It was super cool to be a part of. And so I'm just really glad she was able to come on the show.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shayna. So this is episode 97 of Popping Collars. We're closing in on the big 100.
So close.
Slowly but surely. And today's topic is race and pop culture. It's kind of a broad topic, maybe not so light and frothy, but definitely up in American society in ways that are new and yet all too familiar. In the post-Obama era of the past 2 years, I think it's safe to say that we didn't quite make it to that post-racial promised land that some imagined a black presidency would usher in. Moreover, our current President Trump, who early on referred to Mexicans as rapists and criminals, has recently taken to questioning the intelligence of African-American athletes, journalists, and members of Congress. White supremacists proudly march in our streets once more, and violence against people of color is on the rise. As goes society, so goes pop culture, at least in its desire to address many of these concerns. It seems like more films have come out in the past year that address race. Starting with Get Out in 2017 and exploding with Black Panther early this year, a cavalcade of films has been released that explore racism in America. The Hate U Give, Black Klansman, Sorry to Bother You, Blind Spotting, Monsters and Men, and the upcoming If Beale Street Could Talk, based on the James Baldwin novel of the same name. Also, books by African American authors seem more ubiquitous today than ever, at least in their focus on racism. Maybe our discussion can focus on the particular works of art that speak to the African American experience. But here is my first question for all of you that maybe will get us focused and started on the discussion. What piece of pop culture have you taken in recently that really made you think about the state of racism in America? What about it connected with you and how? And what insights did you get?
I would say most recently, I indulged in a Netflix series called Clever Man. Even though it doesn't necessarily focus on racism in America, it focuses on racism in Australia between Aboriginal people and people of European descent. And in Clever Man, it focuses on a group of people called the Hairy People, who have extraordinary powers and are darker skinned folk with the kinkier hair and things of that nature, who are oppressed, who experience police brutality and discrimination, socioeconomic depression. So that kind of reminded me of a lot of what we see here in the U.S. And it, in a very strange way, it's just kind of like, oh yeah, it's just a reminder that that type of racism doesn't just occur here, but it is worldwide.
Thank you, Shayna. So Greg, what about you?
It's funny because the first thing that popped into my head was Sorry to Bother You. And it's hard to describe. If you haven't seen that movie, there's a particular scene that's just like, oh my gosh, like you sort of viscerally feel like what Lakeith Stanfield, how he experiences racism in that movie. And it's when he's at this all white party. And it's being hosted by Armie Hammer. It's being hosted by Armie Hammer, this party. And he makes Lakeith Stanfield rap in the middle of the party. It's exactly kind of like what you need that scene to be, which is ridiculous and hateful and a little funny. And all of these different emotions all at once to just kind of make you feel like, what is happening? But can I do two? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
sorry,
absolutely.
Ricardo.
I mean,
Sorry, not
Great.
sorry.
you just go with your white male straight privilege.
Yep, straight white man.
You go right ahead,
Explain
sweetie.
racism to us,
You
Greg.
just- yeah. I
Let me
mean,
just kind of spread out here and
yeah. Can you really explain it to me? Because I think
Yeah.
I don't understand what you're saying.
I'm sorry. Let's see. I'm going to mute you, Betsy, so that I can. Okay.
Great.
Okay, all right, Betsy, what do you think?
I have not seen the movie for Angie Thomas's The Hate You Give, but I read the book this summer. We working at a preparatory school, a prep school with a long history here, and having worked with a number of students, Black students from different parts of the country, more urban areas, different areas of the country, actually more rural areas too, but just that their experience of code switching when they come here to a place like Episcopal, and the pressures in which you try to fit in, the ways you kind of craft yourself for this space, which is different than how you would craft yourself at home, through the character of Star in that book, and kind of this also that teenage, just this time of awakening. And I think for many of our students here, whether they are students of color or not, there is a time when you get to boarding school and it's like, how do I fit in? How am I going to kind of be like everybody else? How do I buy the Vineyard Vines clothes? How do I kind of hang in this environment? What do people value here? What's the language we use here? And all those things. And that then you have to start contrasting that with how your family is and how your friends from home are. And when they call you out on the fact that you seem different, you don't seem happy, what's going on? And then starts this other cycle of awakening and kind of, well, who am I? And what am I owning about myself? What am I owning about where I come from? And a number of students, that story it is not a story that gets old, nor is it a story that is old, or is it a story that is changing. So that
Right.
that would be mine from the past year. What about you, Ricardo?
Bezzy, it took mine away from me.
Stop
But
it.
I'll say,
You say your thing. Then. You say, what did it mean to you?
right. So, but being the other man on the panel, I have two as well.
Oh gosh.
Man.
Uh-oh.
Shayna.
Here we go.
Well,
so
go to number 2 then.
It made me think of when I saw Hotel Rwanda years ago. I was in a movie theater, and it's about the genocide in Rwanda, and watched the whole movie, and it's very intense. And I was in the movie theater, and afterwards, the credits are rolling, and I started sobbing uncontrollably. It was really kind of embarrassing. My friends had to kind of escort me out of the theater. And what struck me was I kept thinking, they wear the same T-shirts we do. They wear the same clothes we do. Like, I don't know if I'm explaining myself, but that thing of like, we are all people. And, I'm not saying like the whole all lives matter thing. That's a whole other thing. It's easier to put people in a box when you think of them as other than you.
I just want to note, you had just said how you're kind of drawn to reading some of the books and watching some of the movies. And I find myself on the opposite end of the spectrum, especially over the course of the past year, because as a woman of color, it's absolutely a lived experience. Not even a month and a half ago in my own neighborhood, I was called to a scene where there was a domestic violence situation, and it ended with a police officer shooting a young Latino man, and people were gathering. So there were those of us who were called to help de-escalate the crowds that were gathering and the militarization of the police. So I don't find myself as much as I once was. I think the last movie that I've seen with all Black actors was probably Black Panther. That was like the last movie of color that I really wanted to go see. But I definitely support a lot of the movies and the films that are coming out now. The books, I definitely support authors of color. Pop culture is a really great medium to demonstrate or exhibit what we experience in reality. I mean, some of my pop culture references are a little bit more old school, but I think about like Star Trek and the controversial interracial kiss between Captain Kirk and Uhura, so it's removed enough and it's clothed in science fiction enough that it's like a little distant, so we can actually see it and say, oh, okay, that's a possibility, or is it really?
I think actually the piece of media that I consumed, it was the Ta-Nehisi Coates book that just blew it open. Between the World and Me. The listeners of the show know that, when I say that I read The Hate You Give this summer, I listened to The Hate You Give because I love audiobooks. And I just, I just love hearing stories told in a voice, and he reads it. And it's short enough that like I kind of consumed it, binged it essentially on a road trip. The element of my body is not my own. And the world communicates to me that I can do anything to your body whenever I want to.
Oh, yeah.
And that is what has stuck with me. It is what has led me in different directions biblically. When I look at the Jesus message and who he was talking to and the people who felt the same way, your body is not your own. And I'm a Roman soldier and I can do whatever I want to you. And you can do these little resistance things, oh, you want me to carry your pack? I'll carry your pack for a mile. I'll carry it for another mile too. And then you'll get chewed out by your officer, or, you want to tax me for everything I have. Well, tax me for the cloak off my back because it's more culturally embarrassing for you to see me naked than for me to be naked in front of you. Like those Walter Wink, the powers that be, like it took me right back into that. There was a part of me that connected to some of that as a woman, and the messages that I get that my body but I'm protected somewhat by the collar I wear or the, my outer candy coating shell, my whiteness, and and to really have him just plain and lay it out for me. And I was like, I understand that. And that is terrifying.
And I think, your premise for the show, Ricardo, speaks to a lot of this, because there's these subtle reinforcements of exactly what you're talking about, Betsy, right? And where we see a lot of those are in sports and professional sports, specifically, where you have white owners of basketball teams, football teams, and then predominantly black athletes that play on those teams. And then you have situations like the president of the United States, or people with voices on cable news or something like that, telling black athletes what they can and can't do, what they can and can't talk about. Even, it's this idea of like, you are a paid body for my entertainment. And therefore you can't express your opinions. Right. And that's something that, the president said it outright, right? Wouldn't you like to tell one of these SOBs, get the heck off of my field? It's this idea that, they're not people. They are a commodity for us to be entertained by. Yeah. And that's something that's pervasive in our society.
Why is it a zero-sum game? I guess because it's always been, especially in this country with slavery, it's the way to feel like you're the master is to have the slave or something. But it's like, oh my God, they're gonna like take over, and I'm going to what? Lose my family, lose my job, become enslaved myself. I don't know what. Whatever. That's a bigger question, but it just doesn't make sense to me. Like,
it's a heavy and deep and complex conversation. I know we talked a lot about Black authors that talked about racism and their experiences with it. And part of what I shared with you all before was a panel that I did, I guess it would be almost 3 years ago now. It was called From Blackface to Black Panther, the evolution of how people of color were depicted in arts and entertainment from 1830s to the present, which talked about minstrelsy, blackface minstrelsy in the United States of America, and how that kind of evolved into film. Like, you always saw Black people mostly, and then later on other non-white actors would always be depicted as either docile or the savage or beast. And then you further see that in some of the cartoons. When you see Tom and Jerry, we'll normally see the bottom half of the women of the house. Whenever the Black woman would come out, she was depicted as the Aunt Jemima, wearing the slippers and the apron. And the white woman, when she would come out, she would have like the dainty heels on and be depicted as kind of more sophisticated and ladylike and classy. And so we continue to see those reinforced images, especially after the film. I guess it was 1913. It was like the first film shown in the White House. It was Birth of a Nation, which was supposedly used as a KKK recruiting video, and supposedly still used today. I don't know. I haven't gone to a meeting.
Not lately.
Just haven't, haven't reviewed my membership. So like all of that continues to infiltrate the industry. I see the resistance now, and I'm thankful for it, especially in some of the comic books that we see, the birth of Black Panther in the late 60s, early 70s, and how that aligned with a lot of the civil rights movements that were taking place in the U.S. I'm just so thankful and appreciative of people who were waking up to those social justice changes that were happening in our nation, and making sure that it was realized in film.
It is interesting that you bring up the comics world. When you were talking, Ricardo, and you were like, what is at stake for people? Comics for the last 10 years or so has, at least Marvel anyway, has made a conscious effort to develop more and more diverse characters in sort of their major roles, right? So Miles Morales is Spider-Man. Like, it's not Peter Parker. Miles Morales is Spider-Man. And I'm so happy that his movie is coming out this week, I think, right? Into the Spider-Verse is the Miles Morales Spider-Man movie coming out. So Marvel's made this push, and every time Marvel makes a push and changes a character, all of a sudden there's this giant push back from sort of comic book collecting community saying, like, don't mess with my thing. Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And it's like, you just sort of sit there and you scream at this community, like, what's at stake for you? Spider-Man is a fictional character.
Right.
Like, what's at stake for you? But for some people, it's identity. It's everything is sort of bound up in this character being who it was that they've always known it to be for their entire lives. And that's a sickness.
You know, I just saw a post that I showed to a student on dorm the other night that said, it was last Thursday, the Berlin Wall had now been down the same amount of time that the Berlin Wall had stood. So we've now entered a time when the Berlin Wall has not existed longer than it stood.
Right.
And she's the student then said, well, you know, it's going to take us 200 more years to get to a point when we have Black Americans who have lived longer, not enslaved than enslaved. I mean, longer than that, you know?
Right.
You know, 300 years, 400 years.
A mentor of mine said, as long as you have lived in this country, no person will escape unscathed by racism, sexism, heterosexism, xenophobism, and the isms go on. However, it's about how we covenant with one another in love, that we can tell one another, like, you offended me, or ouch, that hurt, and that we can open our hearts and our minds and just gain a better understanding of how to love each other better. It's tough work, and it's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure. But I believe that more people want to be better than those who kind of just want to stay in their silos of hatred. So that gives me hope.
We've come to the point in the show where I have a list of things to say.
Oh, Shayna,
Six things to say.
All right, hang
Shayna,
on.
this happens every time.
it's bullet points. It's just going to go by Shayna. Like, it just, you know, it's going to be fine. He's not going to remember
quiet.
all of them. I'm just going to name it.
You know, okay, so that is usually true, but I wrote them down this time.
Yes, you wrote them down.
Well,
Yeah,
that might not be a good thing. I was saying earlier, it's like, why can't people just be happy for other people?
Right.
So now I kind of want to say, duh. It's about our identity, right? It's so ingrained in us to have fear or, you know, anger or hatred towards other people in American culture. I mean, obviously we can step out of it. Obviously there are exceptions, but I do honestly think that it's so deep and unconscious. So, you know, a little bit like, what was I thinking? But still, it just doesn't make sense. I just wanted to say that, you know, we're talking about, are there more movies and books out there now than before? And we said, you know, maybe not, but maybe this is a way of dealing with it and processing it out more out in the open. You know, there used to be video recordings before Rodney King of this stuff, and it probably happened maybe almost as much, if not more. So now it's more of a reckoning, and maybe these movies and these books and these memoirs are saying, look, these are the stories now. Let's have it in the center of pop culture and the center of, you know, literary culture, and have it be part of the story and the narrative of our country. So that's a good thing, I think. Whether or not it's more than before, it feels like more to me. Wow. And then the last thing I would say, I think all I want to say is, you know, so I'm Latino. I'm the son of immigrants from Mexico, but I grew up really assimilated. And that was it's like, you know, I was in Wisconsin and I want to be like my friends. And there was kind of embarrassment and shame about my background because we lived on the poorer side of town. But so now I am the rector of an Episcopal church. First of all, I can stop right there. I am the Latino rector of an Episcopal church. That's pretty rare. And they hired me. And whenever I bring it up with them, they don't even get uncomfortable. They just look at me like, well, you're a rector. You're Ricardo. Now, I'm not saying good for them. They saw fit to hire me. I'm just saying I don't know. Maybe that's a good sign. Maybe that's a positive sign. And I don't think about it too much. I forget that I'm Latino in general often, because that's how I am. You know, that's just how it is. But they never seem to. They never seem to focus on it. And I don't know. Maybe I'll do a teaching series on race and see what happens sometime. But it feels good. I suppose it feels good.
Yeah, hey. At the start, people doubted I would make it this far, but I'm proving them wrong. Everybody criticized and they hated on me, but I just stay strong. And no matter what I heard them tell me, it didn't change my mind. I'm still pushing hard, working hard daily. I'm in a race with time. I put my life on the record, always giving it effort at night. I'm always restless, this music's a life sentence. Perfecting my craft in seconds, the essences of the earth. Used to make the world turn, people earn was not deserved. While the weak get knocked down, got people losing their health. This evil's making me mad, I hope I make my father proud. Devote my life to writing raps, I hope I'm on the right path. Spending years of my life dead, I could never take
now we've come to the part of our episode where we have a staff pick. And you know what a staff pick is. I don't need to explain it, so let's just get to it. Betsy, what is your staff pick today?
Ricardo. It is Michelle Obama's book, Becoming. And again, I listened to this book because I was given the option of 19 hours or whatever of Michelle Obama talking to me. And the answer is yes. You say yes to that opportunity happening in your life. And I'm blessed. In boarding schools, we get a week off for Thanksgiving because these children need to go home and see their parents and go home. And we drove a bit for Thanksgiving, and there was this moment where I had kind of I downloaded it. I'd started to listen to it while I packed. I'd kind of gotten to a certain point in the book, and Ruby kept saying to me, "When's Obama showing up? When's Obama showing up?" I'm like, "Chill, cool your jets." She had a whole life going on before Barack Obama showed up. So why just don't hang your hat on that? But he finally did kind of show up. So I paused the book. I actually listened further, backtracked. And we got into the car to drive about 3 hours to where we were going. And I said, I saved it. Obama shows up now. She's like, okay, great. 2 hours later in the car, Ruby, my 11-year-old, is like, why am I still listening to this book? It's so good. And loved it and loved her storytelling and loved how she talked about being a woman and talked about being a girl growing up on the south side of Chicago and what that meant. And the message to me, the parts that were the most heartening were around going into the 2016 election and kind of how she processed that as a mom, as a person in the position she was in. And it reminded me of that Martin Luther King Jr. quote of, the arc of history is long and it bends towards justice. And that idea of we can be as Americans 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And that if I look at American culture and I look at American history, that's all true too. And it's been true for a really long time. And the disheartening nature of not being further along that arc and how she's processed that as a person. And it's a wonderful walk through years of our country, a wonderful walk through the pop culture too. She's a huge music fan. She's to have Stevie Wonder sing for her and Barack to, dance at an inaugural ball, really feeling the weight of that is the weight of her grandfather and the weight of these other people. She tells it well. And I'm actually really excited where things go from here.
Nice.
Becoming by Michelle Obama. Thank you, Betsy. Thank you. You can find Popping Collars on the web at poppingcollarspodcast.com. You can also find us on all the social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and just about anywhere else that is going before Congress to explain itself these days. I had to say it.
That was a good one.
Just type in Popping Collars in the search bar. Greg, do we still have T-shirts?
Oh, we're no. Sorry.
Sold out.
You were looking for
everybody.
a stocking stuffer. No such luck.
That T-shirt is now a collector's item, and you missed out, people. Okay, Finally, you can find our show and lots of other wonderful Episcopal podcasts on episcopalcafe.com. We adore episcopalcafe.com, and we know you will as well. Check them out for all of your Episcopal news needs you never knew you needed. And on that note, this has been Popping Collars. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Betsy. Thank you, Shayna, for coming on the show. We will see you next time. And
keep those collars popped.